I deleted his number. Or maybe I didn't, maybe I just stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen, unable to do it. But when I woke up this morning, my own hand had done it for me, and somehow, it felt like a promise I couldn't take back. And yet, there she was, leaning over the counter, scanning the faded spines of a stack of repair manuals, and I couldn't stop thinking that no number could ever erase her. I've always been clumsy with words. Even now, standing behind the small counter of the repair shop, with the faint scent of motor oil and old leather in the air, I feel like I'm walking on glass when I try to think of her. She moves through the space with a kind of deliberate grace that makes the fluorescent lights flicker against her hair, and for a moment, I forget what I was doing, forgotten tools, scattered papers, the hum of the old fan above. Her name is Mary Ann. She's in her mid-40s, maybe older, but that only makes her presence heavier, more tangible. Confidence radiates off her like a quiet heat. Not arrogance, not even charm exactly, just ease. She touches a wrench, inspects it, and my stomach twists like I've swallowed a knot of anticipation. Her gaze flicks to me, sharp but not accusing, and I feel that tiny, irrational jolt, someone's looking, and I matter to them if only for a second. She notices the small dent in my coffee cup, the one I didn't realize I'd made, and smirks. "You're clumsy," she says, but the words aren't cruel. Just a fact, lightly spoken, with the faintest trace of amusement. I want to explain why I am, but the words stick in my throat, because the truth is tangled up in more than spilled coffee. I hand her the manual she was after. Our fingers brush, accidentally, for just a heartbeat. She doesn't pull away immediately. And even though it's nothing really, my chest lurches like the world just tilted on its axis for a fraction of a second. I clear my throat. She looks back down, rearranging the manuals with a careful precision, but there's a pause. A little hesitation before she finally says, "Thanks." I nod, because I can't think of anything else. And in that small nod, in that too long glance, there's a conversation we're not having. I can feel it, humming between us, in the spaces between sentences, in the quiet that fills the room when she moves away. I pretend to busy myself with paperwork, but I'm aware of her every motion, the tilt of her head, the way her fingers linger on the edge of the counter, the almost imperceptible bite of her lip as she reads the label on a box. I'm too young for her. That thought hits like a sudden punch in the gut, but the more I try to convince myself to step back, the more I find my eyes following her, my mind chasing after the faint trail of her scent, vanilla, old books, something sharp I can't name. I don't know if she notices, and I'm terrified she does. But as she walks past me, heading for the door, she pauses, glances over her shoulder, and for a single moment, our eyes lock. I swear there's a flicker of something, curiosity, amusement, maybe recognition, but before I can figure it out, she's gone. The bell above the door jingles, and she's vanished into the street. And I stand there, my fingers twitching over the counter, my chest tight, my mind replaying that glance over and over. A glance I can't explain, can't name, but also can't stop thinking about. It was another Thursday, and the shop felt quieter than usual. The low hum of the fluorescent lights above made the silence almost tangible. Mary Ann was there again, kneeling on the concrete floor by a half-disassembled engine, her sleeves rolled up, hair loose in soft waves that caught the light. I should have been organizing tools, but instead, I found myself hovering a few steps behind her, pretending to check inventory while really watching the way her hands moved. Calloused, deliberate, careful. Every motion precise, but somehow graceful, like she carried the weight of everything she'd done in her life and still made it look easy. "You're doing it wrong," she said without looking up, voice quiet, almost sharp, but not harsh. Just practical. My stomach clenched. I wanted to argue, to tell her I wasn't trying to do it wrong, but my words stuck in my throat. I can try again," I said, voice too loud in the stillness. She glanced at me for half a second, and the expression she gave me was unreadable. A flicker of something guarded, like a curtain drawn just tight enough to keep me out. She sighed, resting her elbows on her knees, and for a moment, her shoulders slumped. I noticed it, how small she made herself in that instant. How tired she looked. The lines at the corners of her eyes deepened when she rubbed one temple, and I realized she hadn't slept well. Or maybe it was just the weight of everything she carried. I wanted to ask, to say something, anything, but I didn't. I just knelt beside her, handed her the wrench she'd dropped, and let the quiet settle around us. Her fingers brushed mine, accidental again, but lingered slightly longer this time. I didn't pull away, though I felt a jolt shoot up my arm, sharp and impossible to ignore. She looked at me then, eyes sharp, assessing, maybe even afraid of what she might let show. I couldn't tell. You know, she said, voice almost a whisper, sometimes it feels like nothing makes a difference. And then she shook her head, as if she hadn't meant to say it at all. I didn't reply, there wasn't a reply that fit. But the words hung in the air between us, heavier than the engine, heavier than the smell of oil and metal. I watched her laugh once when the wrench slipped from her hand again and clattered to the floor. The sound was soft, a little breathless, like she was laughing at herself but trying not to. Something about it made my chest tighten. And then she leaned back on her heels, and for the briefest instant, her mask slipped. Vulnerable, human, real. I wanted to memorize the moment. I'll get it, I said, bending to pick up the wrench. She didn't protest. She just watched me, quiet, still guarded. But the way her eyes lingered, the way her fingers twitched over the metal surface of the engine, small, telling movements, I could feel the pull between us. A gentle, forbidden energy. When I handed the wrench back, our hands brushed once more, and she didn't pull away. Her gaze met mine for a heartbeat too long, and I felt it, a current, subtle but undeniable. Like the air itself had thickened. And then she smiled. Not a full smile, not yet, but enough. Enough to make me want to stay, even if all the world told me I shouldn't. The rain started suddenly, hard enough to drum on the shop's corrugated roof. I was supposed to leave hours ago, but Marianne had called me back to help with one last engine. The garage smelled of wet asphalt and oil, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Outside, the storm was a relentless percussion. Inside, the air felt charged in a way I couldn't name. She was crouched over the engine, sleeves damp from the spray tracking in from the open door. I knelt beside her, reaching for a wrench she needed, and our knees brushed. I froze, pretending it was nothing, though my pulse betrayed me. She glanced at me, eyes sharp, almost accusatory, and I wondered if she noticed. She didn't pull away, not immediately, but I sensed the distance she maintained, a careful boundary. I thought you'd gone, she said, voice low, almost tired. I tried, I muttered, lowering my gaze to the engine, though I could feel her watching me. We worked in silence for a few minutes, the storm outside filling the gaps between words. Every now and then, our hands would meet over a bolt or a piece of metal. Small touches that lasted a fraction longer than necessary. My throat tightened with the urge to say something, anything, but restraint rooted me in place. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, thumb hovering over the screen, and I caught the tension in her jaw. A name flashed, someone from her past. She exhaled slowly and silenced it without answering. I didn't ask, the moment felt too private, too fragile. But the flicker of her hesitation, the way her shoulders sagged just a little, made the storm outside feel mild in comparison to the storm I felt in my chest. I wanted to tell her everything. But what could I say that wouldn't sound ridiculous? That I've watched her move through this space and wondered if she even notices me beyond the obvious? That when our hands brush, it feels like a declaration I'm not allowed to speak? Instead, I let my hands linger slightly longer on the wrench I handed her. Just an inch. She caught the movement in her peripheral vision, and for a split second, she froze. A crack of thunder rattled the windows, and we both flinched. Our eyes met, wide, unguarded for a heartbeat. So close. The air between us had weight, a quiet, tense energy, like it could snap in either direction. I wanted to lean in. Just a little. Closer. But I didn't. Instead, she shifted, breaking the contact, and went back to the engine as though nothing had happened. My hands dropped to my knees. The wrench felt heavier now, but it wasn't the metal that weighed me down. It was everything unsaid, every thought I couldn't say, every impulse I couldn't act on. And yet, as she moved, the smallest brush of her sleeve against my arm left a trail that burned long after she had turned away. I stayed kneeling there, heart hammering, caught between wanting to retreat and wanting to cross the line I knew I shouldn't. That night, when I finally stepped outside into the wet, cold air, I carried the memory of her glance with me. A near confession. A secret almost shared. And a question lingering in the storm: if I had leaned just a little closer, would she have let me? We ended up in the back office, lights dimmed to a pale glow, the storm outside still hammering the roof. I was supposed to be filing invoices, she was supposed to be checking inventory, but neither of us moved like we were actually working. There was a charged weight in the air, unspoken, impossible to ignore. She leaned back in her chair, fingers drumming lightly on the desk, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the cracked window. I didn't move either, just watched her, every subtle twitch of her shoulders, every blink that betrayed fatigue or thought, trying to parse the invisible lines between us. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was low, uneven, almost foreign coming from someone so usually in control. What are we doing? The question hung, heavier than the storm, slicing through all pretense. I swallowed. The words I wanted to say, the ones that had been building for weeks, jammed in my throat. My hands fidgeted with a pen, tracing the faint scratches on the desk. I don't know, I admitted, almost inaudible. And that was true. I didn't know if I was supposed to stay away, or lean in, or stop noticing the way she breathed when she thought no one was watching. She shifted, uncrossed her arms, then rested her chin on her hand, staring at me like she might actually see through everything I was trying to hide. It can't just be casual, can it? Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was vulnerable. Tentative. Trembling, even. I don't think it can, I whispered back. And for the first time, I saw something in her eyes, a crack in the armor she always wore. A fleeting honesty. We didn't move closer. We didn't touch. But the room shrank until the air felt tight, like it could catch fire. I noticed the slight tremor in her hands as she rubbed them together. She noticed the way I bit my lip when I caught her looking at me, the silent admission that I was thinking of nothing else. Time slowed. We didn't speak for minutes. The only sound was the rain lashing against the window, and the quiet thump of our hearts that felt almost audible. Then she leaned back, shaking her head, a small, defeated laugh escaping her. I'm scared, she said. I didn't answer immediately. I just let the words sink in. Scared. Not angry, not confused, not cynical, just scared. And I realized I was too. Scared of feeling too much, scared of crossing a line, scared that the next step would be irreversible. Finally, she met my gaze fully. Long, steady. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, and in that fragile pause, I wanted to say everything and nothing at the same time. Instead, she whispered, almost to herself, maybe I'm too old for this, or maybe it doesn't matter at all. And the words fell between us like glass, sharp and impossible to catch. I didn't move. I couldn't. The silence that followed was more intimate, more devastating, than anything either of us could have said. It started with a box she had tucked behind the counter. I wasn't supposed to notice, but the corner of it poked out just enough for curiosity to win. She was crouched beside it, digging through papers with that quiet, meticulous focus I had come to recognize. I hesitated, pretending to organize tools, but my eyes were on her. "Those are old," I said finally, nodding toward the box. She paused, hands still on the papers, and didn't meet my gaze. Her voice was low, hesitant. "Yeah. Things I didn't want to think about." I stepped a little closer. Something in her tone stopped me from asking too much, but I couldn't help myself. "Like what?" Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled out a folded letter, worn at the edges. "It's from someone I lost a long time ago," she admitted, voice small, almost ashamed. Her eyes finally met mine, but there was a weight in them that made me quiet instantly. I nodded slowly. "I get it. Some things you can't just put away." She gave a brief, ironic laugh. "Some things follow you, no matter how far you run." She traced the edge of the letter with her finger, as if touching it again would bring back a flood of memory. He was supposed to stay. He wasn't supposed to leave. I thought I'd never feel that empty again. I didn't know what to say. My chest tightened as I remembered her, leaning over the counter, brushing a stray hair from her face, laughing softly at a clumsy moment, and I realized it wasn't just attraction. It was recognition. I was seeing the parts of her she rarely showed anyone. I know someone like that," I said carefully, voice low. "Someone you can't forget, even if you try." I wanted to be careful with my words, but I couldn't hide the tremor in my own hands. She looked at me for a long time, and I could see her walls quivering, inching toward collapse. "You think people like that just go away?" she asked quietly. "No," I said, almost a whisper. "I don't think they do. Maybe they just find a way to stay in the spaces you didn't notice." My heart skipped when I added the last part, aware she would hear more between the lines than I actually said. She nodded slowly, folding the letter back into the envelope and placing it gently in the box. "It's funny," she said softly, how some memories, how some people, they sneak into your chest and you barely notice until one day, it hits you all at once." I realized then that she wasn't just talking about the past. Something about our quiet proximity, the way our hands had brushed over tools before, the way she had looked at me, everything was aligning with that old ache. And yet, it wasn't bitterness or anger. It was raw, honest, fragile. She stood, brushing off her hands, eyes briefly catching mine again. And in that fleeting moment, something seismic shifted. Not explosive, not dramatic, but quietly, completely. I felt it in my chest, the undeniable pulse of connection, fragile but real, and impossibly heavy. As she walked past me to the door, she hesitated just a second, as if weighing whether to stay or leave. I caught the briefest flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, and it was enough to make the room feel like it had expanded and collapsed at the same time. I stayed still, heart hammering, whispering to myself what I could never say aloud. Everything just changed. It was late, and the shop was empty except for us. The hum of the fluorescent lights had softened, and outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle that tapped gently against the windows. We had been working side by side, almost in silence, passing tools back and forth. Every movement carried a weight neither of us needed to name. I noticed her shoulders were tense, just slightly, the way she always tried to carry the world alone. I reached out, hesitated, and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I saw everything she usually kept tucked away: exhaustion, fear, longing. "Do you regret any of it?" I asked softly, voice barely above the whisper of the rain. She shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "I regret nothing. Not the people I've lost. Not the mistakes. Not this. Her hand paused on the edge of the counter, almost unconsciously seeking something to hold on to. I didn't move. I didn't need to. The space between us felt thick with recognition, acknowledgement, a quiet truth neither of us had dared speak until now. I realized the connection wasn't sudden, wasn't perfect, it had been building with every glance, every accidental touch, every moment of unspoken vulnerability. We knelt side by side to tighten a bolt, and our hands brushed. Longer this time. I didn't pull away. She didn't either. The touch wasn't dramatic, no lightning, no fireworks, just warmth. Familiar, safe, inevitable. Sit with me for a minute, she said suddenly, nodding toward the stool by the counter. Her voice was steady, calm, but there was a softness in it I hadn't heard before. I did. We sat close enough that our knees almost touched, careful but not distant. The quiet between us wasn't awkward. It was full of everything we had left unsaid over weeks of lingering glances, stormy nights, and small confessions. I noticed her hand inch closer, brushing against mine, then resting there lightly. I didn't move it. We didn't speak. It wasn't necessary. The acknowledgement was enough. The closeness, the ease, the shared stillness, it carried more weight than words ever could. I understand now, she whispered. Not a declaration, not a promise. Just a recognition of what had been slowly unfolding between us. I nodded, feeling the same. Yeah. Me too. The storm had passed entirely, leaving the air crisp and quiet. We stayed there, side by side, hands barely touching, breathing in rhythm with the stillness of the room. There was no rush, no need to name it. No grand gestures. Only the truth, earned in moments, in patience, in vulnerability shared. When she finally leaned her forehead against my shoulder, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a scene from a movie. It was simple. Necessary. Real. And in that soft, gentle, unspoken surrender, the last piece of hesitation dissolved. I realized then that we didn't need declarations or confessions. We only needed this fragile, quiet understanding that had taken weeks, maybe months, to reach. And for the first time, it felt like everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. I remember walking out of that shop for the first time after everything had shifted, the air crisp and clean, the rain washed away. I kept replaying her subtle gestures, the way her hand had rested against mine, the slight tilt of her head when she finally leaned on my shoulder. Small things, almost imperceptible, but enough to change how I felt about every quiet moment we'd shared before. Weeks have passed, and I still notice how she moves, how she laughs, how she carries herself with that effortless confidence that once made me feel like an intruder in her life. But now it doesn't feel like that anymore. We've found a rhythm, unspoken and patient, that doesn't require grand declarations or dramatic gestures. We've learned that closeness isn't always loud, it can live in a shared silence, a brush of hands, a glance that lingers just a heartbeat too long. For me, the shift has been subtle but seismic. I've learned patience in ways I didn't know I needed. I've learned how to listen to what isn't said, how to feel presence without needing constant confirmation. And most of all, I've learned how desire can exist without rushing, how respect and fascination can fold together into something that feels real and enduring. She, too, has changed. I've seen her exhale more often, let herself linger in moments instead of moving on automatically, guarded against nothing and no one. I think she's begun to trust that connection can be steady, even when it's unexpected, even when it doesn't fit neatly into any map she's carried for years. We didn't leap. We didn't have fireworks or declarations. We simply allowed ourselves to exist in the same space, letting weeks, months, moments accumulate until the quiet pull became undeniable. And in that, love wasn't a sudden explosion, it was a soft, almost imperceptible settling, like water finally finding its level, like a door that had been ajar for years quietly swinging open. Sometimes I catch myself looking at her and thinking about how improbable it all felt. And yet, improbability has a strange way of insisting on its truth. Every day, in small ways, I see it, the tilt of her smile, the brush of her fingers against mine when she passes something across the counter, the way she leans slightly toward me when we're silent. And I realize something that I don't need to say aloud: this is enough. Not perfect, not untouchable, not storybook, just enough. Real, earned, human. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?